Really looking forward to talking to Sister Califa about a wonderful project that I see that she. Oh, there she is, right on time as usual. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Ms. Wanda. It is duly an honor to be able to speak with you. Yes, good morning indeed.
Oh yeah. So you are a wow. You're a Afrogenesis.com scholar awardee. Is that how you pronounce it?
Afrigeneas.com is like one of the first online databases that was created like in the late 90s by a group of maverick African-Ancestors genealogists, as well as IT professionals, historians, professors, teachers. And then one of the guardians of this particular pioneering effort, her name is Miss Electra Price, and she
Mhm.
lives right in Oakland or
Really?
in the Bay Area. Yes, in the Bay Area. She worked at the Family History Centers at Scottish Rite Temple for over 15 years. She's an activist, former social service worker. She was very instrumental by way of my good friend Leah Kimball Price. Introduced me to her grandmother when she found out that I had applied. Very instrumental for preparing me to attend the institute and just setting me on my path and just guiding my steps and my techniques, what to center upon. And so Afrigeneas.com, I hold great honor and respect for putting me on the path, but giving me the tools by working the expert part, making it all mean something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. We know you, as a person who, through movement and storytelling, sort of keep alive, this this uh this forced migration of people of African descent throughout the diaspora,
Yeah.
here in
Mhm.
America, North America, United States, Central and South America,
Mhm.
Europe, etc. I mean, we are all over the place. I mean, it seems as if when Set dismembered Asar,
Sure.
and threw him all over the place, and then Asar's lovely wife Aset went and pulled the pieces back together,
Mhm.
all except one
Yes.
part. It sounds like our story, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It's so interesting you place it inside of that concept and that ancient story that we can draw inspiration from in our own lives. I was just speaking with a sister friend today this morning in and around the roles of women of bringing order and progress to a vision, bringing in the creative element, which is sometimes underestimated, and it really is an art and a science. The kind of thing that is the stronghold in a society that links and binds us, the creative element, the order and the progress to keep things in division, to keep us engaged. And it requires certain elements like love and reciprocity and communing in unity and engagement and communication, spirit, art. And so I would say that during these times in pushing forth the kind of projects or missions that we care to do, in these times that are subjugating women, killing women, or disemboweling us from our roles, it becomes even more challenging to do the kind of things like the project that I'm doing with Ancestry, just to be fired up about your mission because it really does mean something. It's vital to our lives. And so as women, we always see that as important, but sometimes it's highly underestimated or the works that we're doing are somewhat undermined. But, and you just placing that story in context, that's kind of like the mantra for the day, the mantra and the inspiration, and even the work that you do, Ms. Wanda. Like, I got your email and I named a couple of names, and you're able just to place and connect. I saw this person there, I saw this person there, and like it might cross three different time zones or across three different continents, all in one setting, and you will have done it, as a Globetrekker. So I've always admired that about you and your work. So yes.
So tell us about this wonderful dance story 2015. Who
Thank
Do
you.
You Belong? That sounds really
Who's the
amazing. I mean, you've just been all over the place with it, too. And it's so funny. We were almost in New Orleans at the same time.
I
But
know,
your
right?
dance story, yeah, but your dance story was created in 2013. And
Mhm.
you mentioned that it's a guided movement source of embodied knowledge,
Mhm.
unearthed. It incites exploration of cultural pathways and ancestral histories.
Yes.
Bridge with field research and technology, Dance Stories' deep works draws from an evolutionary mission to keep encoded sources of African ancestral legacies linked, vital, and in continuum. That sound, and then the picture of on your um, I don't know, your campaign page. Make sure you give
Yes.
it to us too. It's
Yes.
awesome.
Yes.
So yeah, tell us all about it. It sounds really,
Well,
really good.
Ashe, you just really broke that down. It was good to hear it come out your mouth because it makes sense to me. So that's important because when you're in the work and you guide it and you're writing it and you take a look, you hope that it translates, and it does require a good sit down and listen. Currently, 2015, I'm in a campaign, and the theme for Dance Your Story 2015 is whose do you belong to? Who do you belong to begins to question in a deeper context and on the ground about, your own blood, about who you are related to, not allegorically. We begin to question and corroborate evidence around the stories that we hold in our traditions. And one thing about African-Ancestred genealogy, which I learned by way of the Midwestern African American Genealogy Institute, is that we use three prompts outside of genealogy. Usually when you're doing European genealogy, you can defer to pedigree. When we're talking about African ancestor genealogy and those of us who were affected by the transatlantic slave trade and such, we begin to bring in our own cultural traditions or heritage traditions around the story that kept our stories alive. This is not to say that we don't have ancient written material, which we do in our heritage, but more notably in around the transatlantic slave trade or what have you, the diaspora movement, we talk about the story and we talk about ancestor honoring, and then now with genealogy opening up itself to be a billion-dollar business and we now have access to records that belong to us, we bridge the three. And so if we're wanting to know, we can know. And so in African ancestor genealogy, we do not believe in brick walls, especially when there are ancestors there to knock them down. For instance, I started with my grandparents back in 1996. I always had a desire to know, especially because as a dancer, being inside of dance traditions of Congolese with Tamalonga Kaskolord, Nigerian, Senegalese with Abdoulaye Jakate, Alassane Khan, the Zach and Naomi Juice, the wealth of African dance and drum traditions in the BayArea, Baba Sike, Lexepo. I wanted to know how is it that this connected to me and my family, why I felt it so deep, why I felt the desire to cultivate and make sure that these traditions sustain themselves. And so it became important, like my grandfather would say, to take a look in your own backyard. And so once we began to unearth some of the information that he had on his family surnames are like Waters, Walston, Taylor, that kind of thing. Then I helped him put it together in a pamphlet, took it to the family reunion. He was the toast of the town, but he encouraged me to take it further. My grandmother took it next level. She was kind of like, her mind is like just so sharp for remembering names and times in the stories. So her book turned out to be like 3 times as large, and then she forwarded the effort of doing family reunion books every year. In the process, there was a need to identify a system so that we can keep up and keep corroborating the evidence, names, and information associated with it, and not just write things down and take it as gospel. And so genealogy study and research brought in that science, but working with the Institute brought in kind of like the methodology and the strategy by which we go and corroborate this evidence, because some of our information is not linked. And so the information that we get on Ancestry.com, although we're excited about all the, Ancestry.com, although we're excited about all the leads that pop up, you still have to corroborate that that's the right person associated with your family line. You'll find in certain eras, certain names repeat themselves over and over again because it might reflect the name of a president or an official, or that was a popular name of the time, or it might take on the name of the actual slave sister. And slave sisters are those people who enslaved our ancestors, feel me? And so with that in mind, it's important to begin to corroborate the evidence, and so that we can get to that very ancestor that belongs to us and give them light. When we give them light, they're able to give us the type of wisdoms that serve to better our lives. When we give them light, we're able to dispel the myths or the traumas associated with the times and the circumstances that might have to do with holding back our stories, or certain truths that allow us to continue to heal, and so that it wouldn't translate through generations. Okay, how does this relate to today? In the African dance and drum community alone, we got some fierce dance agents and drum mediums, that kind of thing. I feel like for Africans born here in the United States, since we're having this information technology and science, that we really need to begin to question how this is connected to us more than allegorically. You know what I'm saying? And since these tools are here for us to utilize and they are free, I'm about ushering passageway to be about using them in this lifetime, because those ancestors made it possible. So that's what Dance Story is about. There are a plethora of people who I could sit down and help them learn and create and investigate their family trees. I felt like using the platform of the African dance and drum community in my own backyard gave me enough subjects and agents to work with to draw stories. And inside of that experience, I've been able to make so many lines of symmetry and open up for beautiful exchanges and conversations about people's families, circumstances, and conditions, thus reiterating how brilliant and resilient we are as a people. So Dancestry 2015 begins to challenge, okay, so you don't, as far as that is fine, because every name matters, every circumstance matters. If you can give me the name of the ancestor let's put it, into these different databases, and let's see what we come up with. In some instances, for instance, there was one Capoeira student, I've known him since he was 15, and his surname is King. And so we were speaking about his father. He is African-American and Mexican. His father's African-American. Didn't know too much about that side, but one day by the water, he just decides to bring up about his father and needing to know. And I can understand that in this young man's evolution. So he gave me the names that he did have, and there were wonderful stories that evolved from that around, his uncle being part of the Castiliers, and was able to go back 2 or 3 generations to trace his folks back to a certain area in Arkansas, which is the very same area where some of my kings are from. And so, it's beginning to be like a wondrous journey and an exchange that we're both sharing together as we begin to kind of defragment some of that information and bring in more names and more questions and more healing into the experience. I place this inside of campaigns so that it allows me to travel. It allows me to go and visit archives. It allows me to talk to individual people, and I'm very focused, guided, and directed about the work that I'm doing. And so the Dance History campaign, with all the wonderful support of folks and their contributions, has allowed me to extend it further than the Bay Area and bring it right back to the Bay Area, which reflects that, migratory experience of folks coming from the South to the Bay. And so, that's essentially it and so much more. But who you belong to questions makes you question, like, who do I belong to? That, there are some of our folks who have been adopted by lovely families, like my godson is adopted. And they, too, have a story as to how their passageway came to be. And sometimes there is a notion that well, there used to be a time where records were sealed and they did not have access, that kind of thing. But what I've often found with some of my friends who are in the tradition or in the community, they know a little bit enough of something to go on and to want to know. So I found some wonderful discoveries and experience in and around that and their own personal destinies as to where they're at and how and why they were adopted. So it does transcend the circumstances, this particular work, and so it's really enriched my life such.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm just looking at Dance Story 2015, Whose Do You Belong, on the GoFundMe site, and
Yes.
you're standing on the train tracks, like in the
Oh.
middle. There's like tracks on
You-
on both sides of you, and it says Ogunye. And
yes.
then there's a circle that says deep water beyond this point. There's a flood. And then
Yes.
it says St. Anne,
Mhm.
and then there's some other images right below that. And I
Mhm.
know you were in New Orleans
Mhm.
this July, and you mentioned that you had been at this really wonderful art exhibit. I think you went 3 times. You
Oh,
said,
yes,
yeah. So
yes.
tell us where you've traveled. And so were you born here in the Bay Area?
I am from Oakland, California, and
Okay.
Louisiana raised, meaning that
Oh.
both sides of my family are from Louisiana
Mhm.
and African centered. And that poses to be a very special and unique trek for me, which I have come to appreciate even more through this project. Um, the Purchase Live exhibition was deeply enlightening because it spoke about the domestic slave trade. There's often the history about the transatlantic slave trade, but the domestic slave trade was as equally profound upon American history. And particularly, I've always revered New Orleans as a very important ancestral portal, meaning that it is the place by which lots of our ancients or African ancestors lived and or passed through. Sometimes the notion was that people came direct to New Orleans. In some instances, yes, that's true. And yes, there was a insurmountable influx of Haitians who also came after the revolution and are responsible for a lot of the culture in New Orleans. That's true too. But then there also is the domestic slave trade, which was a critical element of why and who New Orleans is today. And so it basically Purchased Lives chronicles the domestic slave trade from 1808 to 1865, and it talks about where enslaved families as owners and traders traded from the upper south, which they identified as Maryland, North Carolina, Virginia, Washington, D.C. I'll add that to Baltimore, some parts of Kentucky and or Tennessee. And they were sold as surplus laborers to what they were calling the expanding lower south, which is like Alabama, Florida, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Texas. But many of those individuals passed through New Orleans, and so it cited New Orleans as the largest slave market in antebellum America. So a great deal of that post point was the French Market area, and so you have like Algiers, which is across the river, where many of them were brought, and prepared to be sold down the river or up the river or across the river through the marketplace area and ultimately auctioned in Congo Square. Another area or alleyway where they were auctioned at was Pierre Maspero's, which is this famous restaurant, which was up the street from the collections. And people were having a cafe au lait, or, politicians and officials were coming in to sit and discuss the economy of the day. The prime commodity of the day were African people. And so it was pretty, what's the word? It was massive in information, and I appreciated the exhibit, what they did at the Williams Research Center, in categorizing it as it did for us to be able to take in. And the curatorial element was very clean. To also balance it with actual artifacts, like seeing clothes that enslaved Africans would have worn then, or citing some of the businesses that were associated with the economy of slavery, from the Touro hospital, which would take in some of the quote-unquote damaged goods. That means enslaved Africans who might have needed to be fattened up, or if they had some kind of disease, to receive medical attention, get their dental work done, these kind of things to set them up for a good price for the auction, or different clothing companies that sold specifically clothes for working on the plantation, those type of things, and the kind of economy that depended largely upon selling these human beings. And so it was big business here. And so a lot of the sites, the tourist sites in the French Market area, were once like either slave pens or auction blocks, that kind of thing. Or, of course, you have the legendary Congo Square. And it was really just enlightening to be able to connect it all. It breeds another type of consciousness when you begin to come into the knowing of these things, and then ultimately when you begin to relate it to how it affects you, your other people, your community, and us as a whole. This is the information that I believe needs to be taught in history lessons, or history classes or departments, certainly in the Bay Area. So the Ancestry 2015 also has a research element that will always continually educate its constituency about what our findings are, and hopefully it informs and enlightens and empowers others at the same time as us unearthing names, and always encouraging that. The Ancestry 2015 campaign is at GoFundMe.com, and I really do want to share with people that, every donation is a gift that is really a gift to unearthing an ancestor or a generation, or bringing some enlightenment to an individual. This summer, I am planning a trek throughout the state of Louisiana to first be able to hit benchmarks of where my family's lived, all four lines, places like, of course, Shreveport, Monroe, East Carroll Parish, and other points in West Carroll Parish, LaPlace, Opelousas, and Homer, and, of course, New Orleans, and some other spots in between, because I think it's important, while I do have breath, to see the areas where they came from, to begin to kind of like begin to imagine what the circumstances were like coming up, if I can. I have a grandmother who's from Summerfield who will say, I don't know why you would ever want to go back. All we did was get up and pick cotton and eat and go to sleep. I don't know why you want to go back and look for that. She, of course, was a sharecropper. And then she'll tell me in a hot minute, I ain't trying to rehearse anything, Regina, But I'll say to her, can you do this dance with me? Because it's part of my life's choreography, and she'll appreciate, my gift for words, just like she has. Her name is Miss Georgia Brown. I love her. She's like 100. Might be more, but she won't tell it. So, I think that's important for me to get beneath that. Certainly not to bring up what I want to say. There's also very sensitive subject matters and taboos associated with unearthing our family histories and stories. I also believe that, and I speak with a lot of very impressive, like, Black psychologists around psycho-spiritual traditions. I have a caucus of folks I can defer to around that, who make that connection, and who keep me guided around how to approach certain matters that come up, around molestation, around, a way a person might have been killed in trauma, around, just the hardships of poverty, even alcoholism, these things, and/or suicide. So those are the things that, if they are not addressed and they continue from generation to generation, in some form or fashion, they affect the wellness of our families. It is a very challenging and I'm going to say particular circumstance to deal with. Sometimes things get lumped up in a big category, but I care about breath, so I take it very serious when I do this work. And so Ancestry 2015, the whole "whose do you belong to" thing came from a dream I had about my father, who was making sure I knew in case I questioned the work. And so that's the inspiration for that theme. And so I do believe ancestors speak.
Is your father an ancestor now?
Yes, he is. Glory to him. His name is Alvin Charles Calloway. Give praise to life. And he's busy. He's very busy. Yes.
Yeah. So is he like traveling with you?
Yes, I would say, Miss Wanda, when he transitioned, like I didn't know too much about that side, the Calloway side. When I say that, I mean like as far as genealogy goes. We grew up with my grandmother, and she is a straight evangelist, missionary, church-going woman, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. I know a lot of people know what I'm talking about. And I remember the big walnut tree, and she still lives in the same house that we grew up in with her. When I got to, I'm just going to say, closer to college, there was definitely a disconnect because I was in my own life's path. But when I came out of college, it became my mission to restore that. Although I couldn't get actual names at that time, just a little bit of information was more so about us all getting along. When he transitioned, and he had a really great home going, and I thank my brothers and my mother for that as well, that when I went about looking up the genealogy once he transitioned, because all the records are on Ancestry.com as the records of deceased people. It's aggregating all those collections of deceased people, our ancestors. Child, they went back like 4 or 5 generations back quickly. And so it kind of blew my mind. And that just put fire up under me to really pursue it further. So, yes, my father is busy. Very much so. And he travels with me, yes. He is a staunch gatekeeper. And I would say that my grandfather, Claude Waters Jr., passed him that baton.
I have a couple of more questions. Our next guest is in the studio, so hang in there, Zaji. I was just wondering, I was reading, and I want to make sure I understand it correctly, that you are, with these tools around sort of unpacking one's ancestry and those stories, that you, now that you're a graduate of the what's the name of the program? Oh, the Midwestern African-American Genealogy Society. Is that correct?
Institute, Maggie, MAAGI.
Yeah, it sounds like magic to me. It sounds like magic.
That's legit, okay.
Yeah. Are you working with 20 other people or in the dance community here and helping them do the same thing? Is that did I read that correctly?
So what happened was, with the Ancestry 2014, I opened for office, and so essentially, those people who called me for appointment, we would meet and sit down. But the way that came was through a conversation. It wasn't like I put it out public because I'm only one person, so that would have been just like some critical mass. But it would just be walking in the Malonga Center alone was enough to pull from, and having a conversation, and then the magical phrase, "I've always wanted to," and then I would say, "Well, if you could do this, would you?" And they would be like, well, they would respond, "Yes," and then I was like, "Well, here's my number, call me, at least here's the sheet, fill this out, and at least try to do as best as you can and list as much, and do not be frustrated about what you don't know." And that's how we began, and we would meet. And they would give me the names, and then I would come back to them, ask them to ask these questions of their living, because as much as we talk about the ancestor work, so must we honor the living first, the breath that we have. And so talk to the living. Where there might be hesitation before being empowered, this information would give people, the push forward to ask forward. And it's been some really super exciting responses to it, and just has really set people on their path to do it themselves. And that's the whole thing, is for folks to just do it themselves. It's their story, empower them to unearth their story.
Right. Yeah. And the last question has to do with the whole idea of, when people think about African ancestry, they think African as in motherland, and
Yeah.
sort of bypassing, well, who are your
Yeah.
people here?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
ones that, like, that you could call on the phone and say, okay, well, who was your mother, and who was your
Right.
mother's mother and father,
Right.
etc. Yeah, and
Right.
so what's really striking about this project is that you're you're looking to find the homeland, the homes, the soil where that our people sprung, your people sprung from here on this in this
Right. That's
continent,
right.
in this space.
Mhm.
Yeah, which is yeah, it's not necessarily I don't know, I don't hear a whole lot around honoring or owning this place, these
Right.
places where our ancestors have touched, and the soil that comes through our bodies, because that's where we come from, right? The earth. So
Right.
so we are,
Mhm.
so it's like, well, shouldn't we know like what the earth is that's running through us?
Ashe. It's I really appreciate what you just said, because it is a shared vision. Like Afrigeneas.com, their vision is to find and document the last slaveholder and the first African in each family. I share that vision in my works. And so with that being said, is that although I much appreciate the technology of DNA, you still need to go back and unearth saying to document the last slaveholder and the first African in each family. A lot of times when people find out they're from the Tikar people in Cameroon, they go, where do I search now? You go in your own backyard. That's what you do, because they're the ones that's going to guide you to get you to that story. You cannot overlook that, because that you'd be dishonoring, the work of how you even came to be. You know what I'm saying? And it's almost like in appreciating that journey, by the time you do find that information, it is that much more full. You know what I'm saying? And about making that connection. And you know what? It's lifetimes of work, so it may not get done in this one lifetime. It's the reason why you want to engage family and community to help forward the mission.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, we'll definitely have to continue this conversation, because it's so exciting, because this is what I'm interested in. Yeah,
Yes.
this is really awesome. Sort of
I
looking at diaspora citizenship and where is home for Black people in this
yes.
diaspora, and
Yes.
how do we claim it, and who are our
Right.
people? Yeah, it's awesome. Awesome.
Well, in the Bay Area, it just became critical that our voices not get muted in the midst of just so much semantic warfare, and not clarifying who we are and the contributions that we made. So we're responsible for that. And so, that is my contribution. And I just want to say that I'm thankful to the eldership in the community who thoroughly have supported and encouraged me to do so. My family, people like yourselves. And for those people who are interested to begin that trek or pick it back up or be inspired, I recommend sites like Afrigeneas, AFRIGENEAS.com, The Beginning Genealogist, who is curated and directed by a maverick African-Ancestor genealogist, Miss Angela Walton. And I recommend that, you visit me at Workingdalines. That's workingdalines.com. Check out what I'm doing. my journey, and certainly if you want to be in support, hashtag Ancestry 2015 and check out my GoFundMe campaign. I'd love it that you join me on my sojourn. And if anyone has any questions, please feel free to contact me. I'm on Facebook at nzoCALIFA Danceworks on Facebook, and or Khalifa510 at yahoo.com. That's Khalifa with a C. So contact me. I'm always welcoming inquiries and questions, and I get right back. I do. I want to thank you, Ms. Wanda. I appreciate you.
Oh, you're quite welcome, Khalifa. You take good care. And thank you so much for joining us to tell us about your current work in the midst of all
All
of the work
right.
that you do.
Right on. Right on.
All right, peace and blessings.